How much is your visual imagery like the experience of seeing a picture? Or having phosphenes, those little pressure point lights that you see when you press on your eyes? How much is it like experiencing after images, or dreams, or daydreams? Now these are fairly substantial questions about your imagery experience. They're not piddling details. They're questions about major to middle-sized features of the visual experience of imagery that you're presumably having right now. If I asked you questions at that same level of detail about an ordinary external object near to hand, you'd have no trouble at all. About a book, say. How stable is it? Does it flash in and out of existence? Does its cover have a durable color? What happens to its shape when you open it up, spin it around, tear it in half? These questions present no difficulty. But analogous sized questions about imagery experience, most of the people I've spoken to about this find at least some of them challenging. In fact, I think people often simply get it wrong when they think about their imagery experience. And one kind of evidence for this is the failure of psychologists. Over more than 100 years of research, going back to Galton in 1880, to find any real relationship between people's self-reports about their imagery and their performance on cognitive tasks that would presumably be aided by imagery. For example, some people say they have imagery as vivid and detailed as ordinary visual perception, or even more detailed than that. Others claim to have no imagery whatsoever. And yet, there's no consistently detectable performance difference between self-described high and low imagery people on psychological tests like mental rotation tasks, mental unfolding tasks. These are tasks where you're asked to guess how something will look when it's been unfolded. Tests of visual memory, tests of visual creativity. Now, of course, people might still be quite accurate in their judgments about their visual imagery, even if the differences in their judgments don't correspond in any way to performance differences in behavioral tests. Maybe phenomenological differences are irrelevant to behavioral performance, or at least irrelevant to the sorts of tasks that psychologists have so far concocted. But if you share my intuitive sense that it feels somehow difficult to introspect your imagery, if you share my insecurity about your self-knowledge of your ongoing conscious experience of sustaining a visual image of your house, then maybe it won't seem implausible to you to grant that there's no special remarkable perfection in our knowledge of such things, no elite epistemic status. We probably know normal outward objects better, in fact. How about emotional experience? Reflect on your own ongoing emotional experience at this moment. Do you even have any? Mm-hmm. If you don't, try to work some up. Maybe you can get annoyed at me, for example. That seems to be pretty easy. Now let me ask, is it completely obvious to you what the character of that experience is? Does introspection reveal it to you as clearly as visual observation reveals the presence of me here in the front of the room? Can you discern the gross and fine features of your emotional experience as easily and confidently as you can discern the gross and fine features of the clothing of the person sitting in front of you? Can you trace its spatiality or non-spatiality, its viscerality or cognitiveness its involvement with conscious imagery, thought, proprioception, or whatever, as sharply and infallibly as you can discern the shape, texture, color, relative position of your chair? I can't, of course, force any particular answer to these questions. I can only invite you to share my intuitive sense of uncertainty. And it doesn't seem to me, at least, that the problem's merely linguistic here. That I know my emotional experience absolutely perfectly well, and I just struggle to put it into precise words. Okay, how about visual experience? We're getting closer to seeing red here. We're not going to touch that, though. I'll grant that you know probably that you visually experience red in canonical conditions. So, well, we're working up to visual experience here. So, consider your visual experience not when you're looking directly at a canonical color, but rather your visual experience in the region 10 or 30 degrees away from the center point. How clear is it? How finely delineated is your experience of shape and color of the things you're not directly looking at? People give very different answers to this question. Some say they experience distinct shape and color only in a very narrow, rapidly moving area, a foveal area, 1 to 2 degrees of arc, which is about the size of your thumbnail held at arm's length. This actually is my view. You only see a tiny bit moving rapidly around a pretty hazy background. But others disagree with me about this. I don't want to push that particular view. I just want to point out the disagreements. So other people will say that they experience a broad field of clarity that's relatively stable, where shape and color are clearly defined all the way 60 degrees, 100 degrees into the periphery. Still others take a compromise view. They'll grant that shape perception or shape clarity declines precipitously outside the central foveal area of 1 to 2 degrees, but color somehow remains more vivid. This isn't about your perceptual abilities. This is about your phenomenology, what it's like to have a visual experience. All right, so people seem to disagree. These three groups of people, they're talking about the same thing. They're talking about visual experience. Presumably they have the same kind of inner visual experience. I mean, maybe people have radically different visual perceptual experience. That would be interesting if it were the case. But if we set aside that seems to be a slightly strange possibility, then we've got disagreement about currently ongoing conscious experience of visual imagery, and about a big point about it, about the general character of that image, of that perceptual field. Furthermore, people will change their minds over the course of a conversation about this. The phenomenal character of visual experience is not immediately obvious. So we don't really know, I think, as much about our stream of conscious experience, about the phenomenology that's always transpiring within us. We know certain things. Now, I suspect our knowledge tends to be good in three kinds of cases. First, we know the aspects of our phenomenology that we intentionally create or sustain. This is especially pertinent to imagery. If I aim to create a visual image of my house, or if I aim to sustain and consider such a visual image that originally came to me unbidden, then I generally know that I'm visually imagining my house. This is a self-attribution that I work to make true. I can also work to make true particular features of that image. I can decide to imagine the house is red. I succeed, and consequently, I know that I have an image of a red house.